Hello and welcome to episode 58 of HardcoreGaming101.net's Top 47,858 Games of All Time podcast, where we objectively, definitively, and scientifically rank the games you nominate. My name is Carl, and get in here, listener! Get in here, listener! Get in here, listener! I said, come in! Don't just stand there. My panelists today are...
I'm Bob Nader.
I am Satenga.
On this podcast, we have 3 rules. Rule number 1, all rankings are final, official, and scientifically accurate. Rule number 2, you can nominate one game via a 5-star review on iTunes or Stitcher. Rule number 3, you can nominate games that have already been nominated, but don't nominate games we've already ranked. We will be furious. You can see the master list for yourself. Check out bit.ly/47kgames. So the next game is STALKER, Shadow of Chernobyl.
No, it's STALKER.
Yes, sorry, it's... Yeah, you're supposed to pronounce all the letters every time. It's this huge pain in the ass.
Yeah, I guess it's just a stylistic thing. I forget, was it actually an acronym for anything?
I don't know, but it was nominated by @SuggestedName. It was developed by GSC Game World, which better be an acronym, I swear. The publisher was GSC World Publishing. Worldwide is where they published, but it was published by THQ in the US. GSC World Publishing didn't actually have a publishing arm in the US, so eat on that, America. The platform was PC, and the earliest release date and territory was March 20th, 2007 in the US. It came out in the US first? Huh, that's weird. This is a European game, so I'm surprised it came out in the US first. It's just
specifically a Ukrainian game, even. This is one of the... I don't know if this is jumping too soon to say this, but probably one of the bigger, more notable Euro FPSs out there, if not the biggest. And there are a lot
can you
of
name,
those.
like, 3?
I know that, Cal, you're really big on the world of weird Euro FPS games, if not just for the sort of, kitschy jank quality that they exude, but this one is actually legit. It's I don't know, like The Witcher of first-person shooter games, but it came before The Witcher, so,
Well, no, I can see what you're saying with that. So, I mean, we gotta start by saying what STALKER is, because I think STALKER, even if it was the worst game ever, it has a very cool premise. It's a good thing this game was made by Ukrainians, because basically Ukrainians can make this game because Chernobyl was, it's a national tragedy that affected Ukrainians as well. So, they can make whatever game they want and say, well, this happened to us, so it was shitty for us. So that's fair. So the plot of this is that you play as a stalker, but not a real world. Anyway, you play as people that are referred to as stalkers who hunt or stalk through the remains of the Chernobyl area, which has, post the incident, created a series of artifacts that bend and distort reality, and everything around Chernobyl is distorted and weird, and there's mutants and things, and your goal is to collect artifacts, and there's rumors of a mystical, magical gate or vortex of wishes, or whatever it was specifically called. I can't remember the translation. And it will grant a wish if you reach it, so everyone's trying to get to that in the STALKER universe. But this is not actually based on Chernobyl. It's actually based more on a book and kind of adaptation of said book called Roadside Picnic, which is a fantastic sort of novella. I think it's a little short story kind of thing. A very cool thing about similar concept, but just zones rather than Chernobyl. So they just kind of replaced the idea of just these zones that appear, and instead now it's Chernobyl, and that's cool. And that's a really great book if you want to read that. It's a very cool atmosphere in terms of game. When this game was advertised, it was all it's got Chernobyl, and they did the typical actually take photos or get photos of things that were located in Chernobyl, and they put that in the game so that you get an almost real sense of being there. Not quite, because obviously they just made up a bunch of crap, because of course they did, but they advertised it like they had paid attention.
Roadside Picnic itself was the rather loose basis for a 1979 film, which was actually called Stalker, or however you pronounce this in Russian. Shankip.
Is that how you pronounce that in Russian? That's interesting.
I'm probably way off it, but it says loosely based on their novel Roadside Picnic, mixture of elements from science fiction genre with dramatic, philosophical. I couldn't tell you what the zone itself is about, but it also utilizes the term stalker and zone quite a bit, and it's apparently really neat and spooky, and I think got a Blu-ray release recently. And then, and this is very weird, but the film Stalker, based on a book, Roadside Picnic, then got a novelization called Stalker. So it's this weird sort of Street Fighter the movie, the game recursive novel that they produce out of it. I don't know much about the novelization, but I guess
the game, the movie, the book, the movie, the game, the real life, the book, the story.
Yeah. Now, it is really baffling. I think there's just so many layers of being so far removed that I'm not sure if we can consider Shadow Chernobyl here a licensed title, but it does take vague elements from Roadside Picnic and Stalker, but I think tells something entirely
distinct. Let me tell you that.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason is that Stalker is a video game, and the Roadside Picnic story has things that are basically impossible to replicate in video games in a sense that makes sense. The way I think of it, if you've read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which is a much more likely thing for you to have read than Roadside Picnic.
Yeah, definitely.
When they turn on the infinite improbability drive, or whatever its correct name was, sorry.
Yeah, that's the one, that's right. The Heart of Gold and all that.
There's a description of where the universe inside the engine is just insane. It's just, it's imperceivably crazy. That's basically what the zones are in the novel. They're just, you can't understand this except in an abstract sense because it doesn't work. Whereas Stalker is, the zones in Stalker are more this zone causes you to get lifted up into the air and explode, and this zone is full of electricity and nothing particularly. It's otherworldly in the sense that, yes, if there was a space on this planet which just suddenly electrified you, that would be troublesome. But, in the book, there's, someone's bones just liquefy. They just disappear. And it's well, that's not good. Doesn't happen in the game, oddly. You don't... That sort of thing doesn't...
There's actually something specifically from the movie that was made into a gameplay element.
Oh.
But, the movie couldn't obviously show the anomaly since it was a low-budget art film, more or less. But, so one way they showed the anomalies was by having the stalker draw a bolt attached to a string into where he believed an anomaly might be to check for them. And one of the things you can do in the game is that you have an unlimited supply of bolts you can draw to trigger anomalies.
Which is an important part of surviving in the game, because you don't want to walk into an anomaly, especially some of the more vicious ones.
No, you get a meter telling you when you're getting close to one, and a buzzer as well, and it can kind of make out these vague, transparent orbs, like they have Predator cloaking on them. And, you step in one of those, you might not die right away, but you'll just get, stuck in a tornado or zapped by a bolt of lightning or whatever weird elemental effect. Also...
basically, they come in different strengths, so depending on where you are and where you are in the game, and whether you're just got a bit of bad luck, some of them are this one will basically just instantly explode you if you slip up.
Okay, so, admittedly, this is actually one of my big problems with the game, is that... in some cases, the dungeons, if you will, the underground labs, these are almost impossible to avoid even if you know where they are. And you will need to find artifacts that make you at least resistant to certain elemental damage to even stand a chance.
Right, so the artifacts that you can find in this game, and I did say I think that this game is a pseudo-realistic game, which makes it kind of unique in the world of first-person shooters and science fiction fantasy games, because usually they're pretty unrealistic, whereas this game takes comparative pains to be, in air quotes, realistic, with things like you have, encumbrance, you can't carry too much, you've got inventory Tetris systems, and you don't level up. You don't, chug enough cold skis or whatever and become the muscle man suddenly. You have a cycling inventory where you can equip up to, I believe it's 4 artifacts that you can find in the zone.
5.
And 5? Okay. each one can confer things that do affect your stats, because it is slightly RPG-ish, even though it's not an RPG specifically, where you've got things like radiation levels and health regeneration. Yeah, because your health regenerates. But I think your health mostly regenerates based on having artifacts, though you have a small
you have some minor health regeneration by default, which the game doesn't bother to inform you of.
No, that's
Stalker.
That was actually something that bothered me a lot, because it makes it feel at first like medkits are the only way to heal, but no, it's simply a way to stay in combat.
Which is important, because the way the combat works, you'll take a couple of bullets and have no health left as a general rule, so you just gotta kind of chug a medkit in the least realistic fashion imaginable. But yeah, you've got other artifacts that will do things like give you electricity resistance, or I think burn resistance, bullet resistance. Some of them are much rarer than others, but and you got like give you more endurance things, and they usually have negatives.
The endurance one is pretty much mandatory.
It's the one that I think really kind of makes you the slightly more powerful player character, because a lot of the stuff in the game, you're not really on uneven territory with your enemies. You know, like, you got a gun, they got the same gun. You've got armor, they've got the same armor.
You are always underpowered in, like, almost every situation ever. I don't know if we wanted to get to what I consider the main flaw too soon, but I don't want to punch down too much on Stalker here just yet, because there are things to definitely like about it.
I do have to chime in with what really irked me about it.
Let's get the bad things out of the way first. Sure.
Blending the gunplay. It's very RPG-esque in that a die roll actually determines whether or not your bullets are hitting. And it's not like, say, most RPGs where, like, maybe armor changes that die roll, like, shoot a heavily defended enemy and there's a chance your bullets will do nothing. Nope, it's pretty much the same chance, no matter how you're equipped. The only way to affect your chance of hitting is the game's difficulty level. And the irony is, the lower the difficulty, the less likely anyone's bullets are to hit one another. Yeah. So, on the one hand, if you're on easy mode, you'll be starving for bullets. If you're on the master difficulty, you'll be starving for medkits.
And there really isn't much of an in-between. It's just kind of, it's one or the other. And it's a very odd system, especially, as I said, the game does, and I think you can agree, the game does present itself at least pseudo-realistically, so to have...
Well, one slight other problem, though, is the fact that it feels like it's meant to be more of a survival horror, where you're supposed to stealth your way around or dodge things, but no, more often than not, it's you in a one-man army situation against countless goons with assault rifles.
I want to sound like some sort of, like, you know, super, like, beefneck action, like, pro gamer or whatever, but this is a game where I would have liked to feel a little more like a badass, to be honest. Like, give me some sort of extra factor, like psychic powers or whatever. Sorry.
I'm actually a little opposite on this. I would prefer that the survival elements be more pronounced and the game have more options than just shooting your way through everything.
Yeah, exactly. Like Fallout, which it always gives you, like, 3 ways. The muscle way, the stealth way, or the talking way to get out of things. And, like, you know, like, you do talk with all sorts of NPCs, and, like, I know you could bribe, like, this one guy early on in the game to, like, get past a bridge without any fuss or muss. I'd like to have seen a lot more situations like that, where, you know, if you just have, like, the right money or items or know the right thing to say, then you can avoid what would otherwise be a rather harsh experience. But no, you just have to go with the harsh experience.
The thing here is that if you kept up with the game, you'll know this game was very close to vaporware, and it had a troubled development period. I think it went through similar to Prey, in that it went through several iterations where the game was kind of completely different, and
in fact, the earliest versions had nothing to do with Roadside Picnic at all.
Oh, cool.
So, I mean, there's, like, a lot of stuff, and you can read about how they had, like, oh, it's going to be this or it's going to be that, and they've released actually several beta builds of their game where you can see that they did actually work towards these different ideas. So you have a lot of, like, yeah, the AI is going to be so great, and it's going to be, like, smart, but you're going to be able to stealth, and they're like, actually the stealth doesn't work, so we just removed the stealth. So, okay, cool, now we just got really smart AI that has like it's got like the ability to just kind of know where you are all the time, and it's like cool. That's fun, I guess. And you got other things like you kind of get the sense there was going to be more of an RPG or more of a Skyrim, Morrowind, Fallout sort of Bethesda style product going on, but they were like, it's just not really working. Throw it out. You just got to shoot more guys, and you constantly feel that when you play this, where it feels anemic in some places. Like, ooh, I can feel the good idea. Here comes the good idea. Oh wait, they just kind of it's gone. They just took it out, or it's like at the start of the game, and it feels like a bug, but it's not. Like very early on, you basically get dumped into an area where you're like, okay, go kill all those guys with like machine guns, and you got a knife and a shitty pistol. It's like, wait, am I supposed to do that? It's like, yeah, just do it. It's fine.
The only thing that equivocates that is that you have like helpful stalkers who are backing you up, and if they don't necessarily cause a lot of damage, then they can at least distract opponents. That gives you more of a chance to actually kill the bad guys in question.
Yeah, so there's some cool stuff going on where, like, there's lots of AI things where there'll be roaming packs of mutant dogs and stuff, or there'll be friendly stalkers just walking up and down the road, and there'll be not less friendly stalkers walking up and down the road, and bandits, I think they're just referred to in the game. And there's, like, some really nice world touches that are all over, and it's really easy to see why people bought into Stalker. 2007 was kind of a dead year for PC FPSs, I think. I just remember that when Stalker actually came out, it was one of the only big FPSs that people were talking about for at least a month or so. It was just like, this game actually surprised everyone.
In a lot of ways, that's probably one of my biggest problems, though, is that a lot of the game revolves around smoke and mirrors, that once you see past that, it really is a pretty anemic open-world shooter.
Yeah, and I think that's common with several Euro games where they do have that sort of style, where they are smoke and mirrors, but you're expected to essentially buy into the smoke and mirrors. It's like, look, it's the world. Don't look too deep. But it just has that. We are evoking atmosphere, and you're supposed to just buy into the atmosphere and then just keep going. If you try and dig deep into it, it'll be like, oh, it fell apart.
So pay no attention to the jank behind the curtain.
Yeah, I think that's an important way to embrace these sort of games. You just have to be. I mean, your hand has to hover over quick save in this game. There's really no two ways about it.
F6 is the button.
You'll get shot. The game. One thing I liked about the game when it was new, and I still like about it, is headshots are pretty much 1-to-1 fatal in this game. Like something gets hit in the head, it just bricks, like straight up, which is cool. Obviously, the bullet has to register as a hit because the game will be like, no, you didn't hit. I don't care.
Difficulty because enemies will think through headshots otherwise.
And so the problem, though, with that is you also can get headshots. So make sure you've saved, because if you get headshot, you're pretty much corpse, like, very quickly. And a lot of the game is spent leaning and kind of just hovering around crates and corners and things and just being like, hey, there's that guy, I've got to shoot that guy. Alright, let him just get closer and then I'll shoot. Yeah, and that's a lot of the game.
This game didn't receive any release outside of the PC, did it?
Nope.
There's a reason for that.
One thing that we'll mention is, we did mention that there was a horror element. I think we mentioned it, and we should go in a little bit of detail that there are some more notable mutants. In that, again, because this game kind of plays realistically, in a sense, it's interesting to see, again, like, actual kind of fantasy elements. You've got enemies who are invisible with that Predator-style hiding thing. You've got these creepy guys that aren't really hard to kill, but are really gross, called Snorks, which is just kind of like, gas mask wearing guys that kick you or something. And they're off-putting enemies that are kind of like creepy in a Euro horror, Russian, Ukrainian sort of just, they're just kind of off-putting, but they would also just wouldn't be out of place in like a industrial music video sort of thing. So,
they're also kind of affected by that whole difficulty problem I mentioned, because I could see where on the easier difficulties they'd be absolute nightmares to deal with, but on the master difficulty level, it's still the guys with guns you have to be afraid of, since the mutants can die pretty quickly thanks to having larger heads to shoot.
Yeah.
I think there's only one mutant that doesn't drop with a headshot. Or maybe one or two. Some of the later game mutants, I think, take more than one headshot.
Pseudo-giant.
Yeah.
Those things are pretty damn freakish, I will admit.
So there's definitely a cool horror element.
I just think it takes a little too long to actually get around to the major mutants being a problem. Like, I kind of would personally like to see the more horrific stuff up front, but you only get, like, vague scraps of it, like all these shootings and howlings in the very far off. And
I think it's an interesting approach in that, especially in this modern age.
I see what they were going for.
You turn on your game, and within 30 seconds, Bonnie the Rabbit's ripping your face out, like...
Yeah, Dead Space 2 literally started out like that, as I remember.
So to kind of have an alternate where the game is very... And this is typical of this kind of horror as well, where it's just like a very slow burn, you get like 5, 6, maybe even 10 hours into the game before it starts to be like, actually there's mutants and stuff, and they're gonna get you. So we probably have to move into figuring out where Stalker would go in our list.
Huh. You think we should right away? Because I think we've mostly been very negative on it. I didn't know if you guys want to mention any upsides really worth taking away from it.
Basically, the upsides in this game are it has a really solid atmosphere, and if it's what you're looking for, you probably really like it. It's more of an issue that there are issues, and they could break the game for you in the sense you're just like, I can't play this. It's just, I'm not liking it. Or you can stick with it, and it might grow on you. It grew on me when I played it, but I played it when it was newer, so that's a little trickier. I really like the sort of premise of the game. Like, it's the kind of game that, for me, I like the premise so much that I'm willing to put up with so much shit in this game, have some shit. I'm like, oh,
yeah,
again?
I know I could say that about a few other games, but they're not coming to mind. I totally agree with you, though. I see where you're coming from.
If you're crazy enough, the fans have gone through, and there are a lot of fans for the Stalker games, and they really went through, and they're like, I don't like this, I want to change this, and so, I don't know, if you're crazy, you can check out, like, the mods and things. A little like a Bethesda game, there's quite a few that will alter the game, that maybe makes it more palatable to you, which is a good way to get through it if you want to play this one. And there's some really cool stuff, like when there's actually, like, horror or ghost elements in terms of, like, a brain scorcher, like, psychic thing that just kills anyone that gets in range, and so you've got all these, like, zombies walking around with machine guns that, like, shout in nonsense language while trying to gun you down. Some great set pieces and stuff in here, but you have to stomach the game, which is true of a lot of Euro games as well. You gotta stomach it. If you can stomach it, if you can hold it there, you'll be like, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah, no, that pretty much is the definitive word. I mean, I'm going to confess, I did not get nearly as far in this as you guys did, because I kind of suck at it, and I didn't have as much patience, unfortunately, to get to see the cooler stuff later. I was just like, I was just getting hung up on early on, just, groups of like 6 or 7 punks. I couldn't really take them on, and just like accidentally running into shit I didn't mean to, and this is very much a take it or leave it game. I wouldn't say I'd totally leave it, but I have a little bit of difficulty getting into this one personally, so...
I sympathize with the whole liking the premise support. I definitely do as well, but my problem is that just mechanically it is so slapdash that it's just not a very well designed game, and that's what's bugging me so much about it.
It does.
So I'm going to throw this out so that, because you have to throw it somewhere. I'm throwing it right now. I'm putting it above Quark is where I'm putting it.
Wait, how high up is that?
That is at
wow.
80.
I hate to tell you, but that's considerably higher than where I'd place it, honestly.
For me, it would probably be somewhere below Dark Forces 2, since at least that one gives you some enjoyment before, like, completely crapping out into the level design.
I have to totally agree. Like, just the premise of Stalker sells what it is just so much, but this is not a game I can really easily recommend to everyone, but it did really stand out for its time because 2007 was around the time when video games started to suck more and I didn't like them as much because I blame Gears of War for, like, collapsing a lot of the Okay, never mind, that's a totally different tangent. I will say that, from what I understand, I haven't actually played it, but the third Stalker game, Call of Pripyat, is, like, the ultimate in gameplay experience, where things are definitely more refined, and, arguably better than Shadow Chernobyl, and definitely much better than Clear Sky.
Oh, the gameplay is definitely better in the third Stalker game. I don't think you can argue on that point. They finally worked out how to design a game.
I think Call of Pripyat is definitely the game that Shadow Chernobyl wants to be, so if we get around to ranking that, I definitely place it higher. But Shadow Chernobyl is definitely a very earnest effort. They definitely tried on this game really hard, and I definitely don't want to kick it down too far, but...
Well, they shot high in terms of what they wanted, and I still am impressed with this game, that they...
I am
got
too.
Something done that was surprisingly... It holds itself together when it probably shouldn't even do that,
it's kind of an anomaly. It's like kind of held together with duct tape in some points, but the engine still functions pretty well, all things considered.
I do think, I obviously I think it's better than the Jedi Knight, because I put it a little higher. But the reason is, there aren't too many games that I think can really fit the Stalker mold. Just in terms of it dares to give you sci-fi, because there is sci-fi in there.
Oh, yeah.
And a little bit of realism, but not too much. And it's got inventory Tetris. And there's quite a few things that you don't see all together in one package all that often. There is literally 1,000 Star Wars games, and there's a bunch that were inspired by Star Wars. And there's not as many first-person melee games as much. But Dark Forces doesn't really put in the effort to be a great first-person flash 'em up, I guess. And so I think Stalker's still kind of unique, other than the other Stalker games. And there are quite a few games that are a little bit inspired by Stalker in terms of they're realistic games about survival or about procedural proc-gen survival kind of stuff, what is it, The Longest Night. I even think something like Battleground Unknown, is that game, that multiplayer game?
Player Unknown Battleground, whatever.
Thank you.
I've only vaguely heard of it. I don't actually know what it is.
There's little bits of what Stalker was in those, but I don't think anything has that slight shift into science fiction that I think this game actually does reasonably well, even though, depending on your difficulty, your mileage may vary a little bit. But I really like that, and, even the games that kind of did it, like Far Cry, did it so much worse, and that's why I think it needs to be just a little bit, sort of, higher. Maybe I'd be sort of a little lower to around Devil's Crush, maybe somewhere.
I think ultimately one way of playing it is that, to me, the game has so many interesting ideas, but too much of it is focused on the rather lackluster gunplay.
Yeah, that is almost a deal breaker for me, I admit. I mean, I guess you can laugh at me for being... I've beaten Battletoads, so, you can't say that I am bad at games, but this...
I don't really find it difficult, since you can save and you can literally save anywhere, and that's also part of the problem, because it feels like it was designed with that specifically in mind.
Yeah, it's not necessarily difficult, just so much as it is frustrating and making me feel like it's not totally respectful of my time. If I have to reload this part 30 tries until I do it right, if that's what the game wants, well, okay, but I'm annoyed by that.
Sometimes it can be about solving it slightly differently, sometimes it can be about altering... Because you can alter your approach in this game, which I do like. It's not a linear, a hard linear FPS like Call of Duty or something. The areas are open sometimes, depends on the area, obviously, but, you can actually say, ooh, I want to go approach from the left, or I want to approach from the right, maybe I'll try something a little different, and you can kind of toy with the AI a bit, try and coax it to go around corners and things.
Okay, I will admit one case where stealth technically works is that if you have the enemy's attention and manage to stay out of sight for a little while, it is possible to outflank them because they'll be focused on where they last saw and heard you, but...
I mean, that's a nice touch, it's in there, and it's the residual effects of the AI they wrote that they kind of had to script out, because a lot like Trespasser.
With that also is that the level design rarely actually allows you to do that, because either there's too little cover to maneuver around, or the area itself is too linear.
it is very hapdash as a game. It's slapped together. I hope our friend Bob is still awake because I know he didn't really join in on this one because he didn't really play it.
I'm here.
But Bob, is either argument convincing you in any way?
Honestly, I think around Devil's Crush is fair. But if you guys think disagree, then that's okay too.
A place where I was going to kind of lowball it is between Snatcher and Blazing Lasers.
I'm okay with everyone else's.
Yeah, that would be my choice as well.
I really like Blazing Lasers and Little Samson, so I'm putting in a compromise to say that I would admit Stalker's at least better than those games that I like a lot more, but it's just really, really difficult to rank a game like this. I just want to be, acknowledging that it definitely has faults, but, its overall picture is pretty
interesting. To me, my biggest fault is that it's a game that kind of sells on atmosphere alone, because the gameplay itself is fundamentally broken.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys want to move this to the 99th spot? Was it between Snatcher and Blazing Lasers?
Yep, that's what I suggested.
That's where it is now.
That's everyone against everyone. That will be position 99, and that will put it above Blazing Lasers and below Snatcher. This is a game that I mean, you guys might not recommend it. I would recommend it because you might actually like it, and that's a tough one. You have to really play it to know if you'll get into it.
Yeah, I know some people are actually pretty big fans of this game. I'm not one of them. I'm not sure if I will be, but it's really interesting in a way. And I don't know if we want to mention anything about...
I can't say I truly dislike it, but I also can't really rank it high.
Maybe skip this one and get Call of Piat. That's probably the Pipriot. That's probably the one that you want to check out.
Which is technically not Stalker 2. I know they tried to make a Stalker 2, but there were lots of development problems. I think it might be canceled now. I don't know.
Yep, it's done and dusted. There's no more, and there's no more of this recording.
Too bad.
Hello everyone, Jeff the Electric Viking here. You might remember me as the biggest Superscaler fan in the world, or perhaps as the resident bad at games guy. Nevertheless, I've had the good fortune of working with the HD 101 gang for over a year now, and I have a stake in seeing the outfit continue to move from strength to strength, and that's where you come in. I would humbly ask that you consider a small monthly contribution to HD 101 on Patreon. Your money funds paid writing on the video games that you love, helps fund this show, and on top of that, you'll gain access to an add-on version of the HD 101 podcast, with bonus content every week. All of this can be had for the price of a coffee, beer, or whatever the hell it is you drink in your corner of the world. Thanks for your consideration. And remember, be sure to have your pets spayed or neutered.
Now, our next game is Pokémon Pinball, Ruby and Sapphire. It contains both of those in one. What a deal. It was nominated by Zillion on Stitcher. It was developed by Jupiter, published by the Pokémon Company. It was released on the Game Boy Advance, and its earliest release date and territory was August 1st, 2003 in Japan. This is a pinball game where the default controls are not left shoulder and right shoulder for their respective flippers.
Definitely the worst game ever. Sorry, Bob, you were saying
into the Jones Zone it goes.
Yeah, straight to the Jones Zone.
Okay.
So, first and foremost, I think one of the worst things about this game is that it's a pinball video game, and it feels like it mainly took its inspiration from the toy pinball games you could find at Toys R Us and such.
Which are great if you own one in real life, but not so good on a handheld.
Yeah, I mean, in real life, there's a reason for those limitations. But on a video game, it just feels like, why even bother?
And you'd think that a handheld would be like the best place for a pinball game, since it's just something you can just open up and play really quickly, but there aren't a ton of good handheld pinball games for whatever reason.
Well, one of the big reasons, and I'll be fair to this game, it actually does a pretty good job of this specifically. The screen size makes it difficult to make a really solid pinball game. It can be tricky to squeeze down a table to that size. So this game does what a lot of them do with where it tracks the ball up and down the playfield, and the physics aren't too fast, too furious, so that you can actually keep an eye on track on the ball and stuff. And it's pretty good like that.
Too fast, too furious.
Yeah, that's my licensed pinball that I made with Too Fast, Too Furious.
Is there a Fast and Furious pinball? There really should be if there isn't. It'd be... You know what? Let me look this up on the side. Keep going.
You can look that up. So there's 2 tables in this game, and if you think you can guess what they would be, you're almost certainly right. And they're both really kind of just boring and uninteresting.
They're kind of tiny, and there's not a lot of stuff to do in them, which is kind of a deal killer for any pinball game.
There's like a ramp. There's a couple of bumpers. There's a split in one of the ramps, if I remember correctly.
Oh my
and
God.
There's some Pokemon dancing all over the stage, like, look at us, it's Pokemon. Pokemon, 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 Pokemon. And that's...
There is no Fast and Furious pinball machine, as a matter of fact. Come on, Stern, what are you guys doing? Get on it. Oh, well, anyway, about this game.
And that's this game.
You can tell Hank is really into this, can't you?
Okay, look. This
so
is
let's
around...
apologize to people that like Pokemon Pinball. Specifically Ruby and Sapphire.
Actually, I do want to say, I do actually like the first Pokemon Pinball on the Game Boy Color a good deal, to be honest. It's probably not much better than this, but it does feel like things are a little more tightly designed, balls a little faster, it's got a bit more...
I think another thing to consider is that Game Boy Color had more hardware limitations, so it's a lot easier to forgive the shortcomings compared to the GBA version.
Yeah.
Well, they just seem to pour it all into making the graphics prettier.
And they are nice graphics, and they included over 200 Pokemon in the game.
But Snorlax is not one of them. It's an F! My favorite Pokemon, you bastards! Why?
And there's some other non-Smeagol thing painting up the board, which bothers the hell out of me.
Yeah, who is... I can't even remember that one.
And I do like that Spoink, who needs to bounce his ball or he'll die, does not bounce his ball up and down on his head, so I'm not really sure how that works, but he is the, it's not called the shooter, is it?
Plunger.
Plunger. That's right, it's the plunger.
That's a cute touch, I'll admit.
Yeah, I like some of the touches, and there's lots of, there's a few nice touches, and I like so the main thing that I think they kind of maybe got weird out here was they tried to make this a pinball game that you could play a lot, your classic pinball machine, your classic pinball table, unless you're what do you call them, a ball jockey? I'm going to call them ball jockeys. Unless you're a ball jockey, you're not going to play a pinball machine for more than 10 minutes or whatever, you pull the plunger back, you smack the flappers a bit, and then that's it, you're done. You're like, well, the ball went through the middle too many times and I lose. And that happens a lot in real life pinball. But because this is a handheld game and it's a Pokemon game, they went, all right, well, let's try and make this a little bit longer. So they basically introduced this grinding element where you basically have to make the same skill shot over and over and over on the respective tables to trigger a catch Pokemon mode, and then you have to hit a couple of the skill shots, which are not particularly difficult or interesting, to catch the Pokemon, and then you cycle that kind of just until the game ends, basically.
Yeah, there's...
balls.
I don't think there's any kind of ending or big final mode to speak of, like most pinball games have.
Well, you do have a few boss stages, at least. I forget exactly.
So when you catch enough Pokemon or you hatch Pokemon, you add to this little counter, and when I think it's after you get a total of 3 points or whatever on this counter, the game then moves to a bonus table, which is similar to Devil's Crush style, side tables, where you just have some sort of extra, much less realistic minigame where things walk across the level and you gotta hit them or you gotta do something. But they're kind of long and boring, and also you can lose them and then you don't get back into them very easily. And so it's just kind of I gotta do that all over again. And it's not fun to be in the bonus stage. If you compare this to Devil Crush, where those Devil Crush mini pinball things, I think that you can't really get through one of those in after 30 seconds, you've either won or you've been kicked out for the most part. They're quick, they're punchy. They
feel like boss battles.
Yeah, they're a lot slower. Then, if you have to basically grind to the boss, then the boss shows up, and if you don't beat the boss, then you just get kicked out. You have to do it all over again. The other small touch is that you can make skill shots to advance your your journey in the Pokemon world, and it doesn't really do anything but change the Pokemon you catch.
Right, there's no extra tables or anything. You get 2, and that's all you get.
I think one of the most annoying things is that the whole... And, like, when you look at pinball, most licensed pinball tables and such, they typically are based around several events from that walk. But here, it's all based on just the whole process of acquiring Pokemon. Like, if this were a real pinball table, if there were an actual Pokemon pinball table, I could see it being based around having to collect all the gym badges, take on the Elite Four, maybe battle Team Rocket or whatever the current team is somewhere along the way. Video mode or 2. Just all there are just so many little events that would make for a great mode but the Pokemon pinball games are just based on that cycle of catching, evolving, and hatching.
And I will say that the first Pokemon Pinball, which we haven't ranked, probably falls prey to a good deal of these faults as well, but that game's a bit simpler, and I believe the ball physics are considerably faster, and it feels like a bit more of a cozy experience. Just something about the Ruby Sapphire version here feels like it tried to do more without really fixing any potential core problems that the first one had, and I don't know, it feels like a bit of a lazy result.
Interesting, gimmicks, there's no multi-ball. There's no, I don't think there's any sort of, magnetic or any sort of, curving things happening. It's a very basic pinball machine.
Okay, here's the problem. There's basically 2 kinds of people who are going to be interested in pinball games. You're going to have the people who want realistic tables, give you a lot of things to do and lots of ways to score points and all that. And you're going to want the people who have, a lot of things on the table, a lot of cool touches and fun extra stuff. And this game will appeal to neither of those people.
Yeah, you've basically got either realistic pinball tables, or you've got quite fantasy-style, unrealistic pinball tables, and those are kind of the 2 main categories of pinball games, and this one's kind of smack-bang in the middle, which I don't think anyone wanted.
As we know, Pokemon, being the massive media giant that it was, and still arguably is, has had a myriad of spin-offs, and it was only inevitable, I think, that a pinball game would arise out of that. So, and they already did one at this point, so maybe this is one of those cases where a licensed game falls victim to its own status and is mostly just pushed out for recognition and not much else.
I feel like some people would like this game. I know it sold pretty well, and I've read, there's guides, and people clearly don't hate this game. Some people clearly don't hate this game. On the basic level, it delivers, and I'll give it that,
Yeah.
The ball physics work, the flippers work, you have a cycle that the gameplay takes place, you catch Pokemon, it has a Pokédex, so, that's kind of rewarding in its own way.
It is at least a little better than Mario Pinball Land, because that's not just about, just bouncing the ball around in circles over and over, trying to hit the one thing that'll let you get to where you actually need to be.
Yeah.
Man, I didn't like Mario Pinball Land at all.
It barely felt less like a pinball game and more like some sort of odd shooting type game, but you shot with pinball flippers instead. This is a pinball game, certainly, but I couldn't tell you whether it's one of the better ones on the GBA out of, I don't know, half dozen to 10 or whatever pinball titles that were released on that. I can't say, though, that we already have Devil's Crush on this list, which I consider the gold standard of non-realistic pinball. And, that's, midway around the list. Still, pretty high, around the 80s, 90s or whatever, but I think almost every other pinball game we look at, and I don't want to discourage anyone to send in pinball requests. I mean, I find pinball games interesting, but any pinball game you look at realistically is probably not going to score very much higher than Devil's Crush. And this one definitely is not going to.
And Pinball Arcade. I think both of those I'd put really high.
That's kind of an odd case because those are more platforms and specifically structured pinball games. But yeah, with the sheer amount of tables those offer, there's definitely no question.
That's something that I think is important. I realized that, look, this kind of older pinball game, on the GBA, you weren't going to get too many tables. But you get 2 tables in this game, and they're so similar. At least with Devil Crush, and it's an older game, by the way, the table had several sections to it, and each section at least felt kind of different and distinct and interesting. And this game just doesn't have even that sort of feel of progressing through the table that Devil's Crush has. It can't have that because it It's just one fairly bland table times 2.
Also, let's take into consideration one historical aspect, is that this would have been a full-price Game Boy Advance game with such low content.
Ooh.
Well, the content is you grind out the pinball, and I think some people who just wanted to play a pretty, it's not a stressful pinball game, and it's very generous with the, give you extra shots and things. It's very, I guess it's a pinball game for people that don't really want a pinball game, but want to play a pinball game that's
Cal, are you saying
they like pinball?
Despite Pokemon, how long Pokemon's been around and its popularity, there has never been an official pinball machine.
I'm surprised at that. I guess maybe solid-state pinball isn't as big in Japan, because I can't actually think of too many actual Japanese-made machines. That's mostly a big thing in the West.
Well, I would say that Nintendo wouldn't want to associate their properties with gambling, but they do have some pachinko.
There are Nintendo, there are like 2 Mario pinball machines, like officially.
Oh, well, shoot. I stand corrected.
So, I don't know, maybe that no one could get the license.
And the classic pinball game Gladiators was originally going to be a Zelda one.
Oh, really?
But okay, so that's, before we go too off topic and start having to talk about Nintendo as a company for no reason at all, we have to rank this one, and unfortunately for this game, I don't think any of us liked it especially. And, if you gave me a choice between playing this and no pinball game, I probably wouldn't play this. And that's my big issue with it, If I had a Pokemon game on my Game Boy Advance, I'd be like, no, I don't want that pinball game. I want the Pokemon game, because that's the one you want, right? This was like kids that accidentally got given, like, a pinball version of the game or something. Like, there's so many other better Game Boy Advanced games that you gotta reach really low before you're like, alright, I'll play that stupid pinball game, because it's just not...
Wait, there are better pinball games, there are better Game Boy Advance games, A, there are better pinball games, B, and C, there are better Pokemon games! Even among the spin-offs, there are probably...
Like, if you had to buy this game, I don't know how much it would cost in the US. I'll say like $40 US or whatever, $50 US. I don't know how much it would cost when it came out, because I'm not from the US, but I think it would have been better off taking that money and just throwing it into random pinball machines that you found, just take that money and spend $40 on real pinball machines when you see them in the wild, and you would have probably get more out of it in terms of pinball. Or if you want Pokemon, go get the actual Pokemon experience. So, I actually do agree that this kind of needs to sit in the Jones zone. We have Mario Pinball Land, which...
it's better than that, kind of.
Yeah.
The problem is, Mario Pinball Land feels like at least they tried to make a game with Mario touches and Mario in there, They shot higher. This game feels like low effort to maximum low effort. Like, we're gonna make it pretty, we're gonna guss it up, but pinball, forget about it. We're not even gonna pay attention to that part. Like, we do the bare minimum for the pinball and make everything else really nice and shiny, and hopefully they won't realize that the game's not very good. And that bothers me a little bit.
I don't hate this game more than Sewer Shark and Bill Lamebier's Combat Basketball.
I think it's kind of around the Rats range.
It has an unimaginative name. Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball has the name Bill Lambier's Combat Basketball. They didn't even name this like Pokemon Pinball, whatever. I don't know what the region of Ruby and Sapphire takes place in, but they didn't even call it like that, or Pinball Pals, Pokemon Pajamas, or something. I don't know. Look, the point is, no, it's probably a little bit more sufferable than those games, but I would stop it well short of kind of the Fantasy World Dizzy. I couldn't.
I think that's fair.
Put it above Fantasy World Dizzy. So,
Gunhart, I'm going to ask.
Yes.
Actually, I'm going to ask this specifically of Gunhart. Since he is the major authority when we ranked Evergrace a few episodes ago, would you place Pokemon Pinball Ruby Sapphire above or below Evergrace?
Maybe above it, since Evergrace is just so poorly thought out.
Shoddy, yeah. This is at least a competent game. It's just one of those ones where there's not really much of a reason to play this, but it exists. It is what it is. So if the final word in that case is between Fantasy World Dizzy and Evergrace, I think that's the fairest ranking we can get.
That's locked in as far as I'm concerned.
All right, fantastic. How long did that take anyway?
Bob, talk us out.
Let's never talk about this game again.
Wow, what a thrilling, scintillating conversation we just had about those games. And by we, I mean Cal, Bobinator, Satenga, and Gunheart. Not me, I wasn't in this episode, although I would be in this episode if you were a Patreon donor. That's right, you go to patreon.com/HG101 and you'll get, in addition to all sorts of other amazing goodies like the new Contra and Other Konami Classics book, which features a little article by yours truly. You'd also be able to get access at any donation tier to bonus rankings and bonus conversations that exist only on the Patreon subscriber exclusive RSS feed for this podcast. If you were listening to that show, that feed, you would have heard this show yesterday. You wouldn't be hearing this annoying spiel. And instead, in its place, you'd be hearing me finish up our little symposium on what it's like to be a foreigner going to Japan to do a little bit of retro game collecting, what the arcade and game center scene is like over there, what games are popular right now, what you would expect to find. I think our conclusions might surprise you. Anyway, that's patreon.com/HG101. Go there, check it out, all kinds of goodies, Patreon bonus feed, patron bonus feed for subscribers. It's awesome. I'm there. And we're going to close out the show now. Thanks for listening.
That's all for this episode of Hardcore Gaming 101's Top Games Podcast. Special thanks goes out to @Suggested_Name on Twitter and Zillion on Stitcher for nominating those games. And thanks to those of you who we didn't get to yet, we will be getting to you soon. Thanks as well to my lovely co-hosts and co-patriots, our editor Jeff Rude, our theme song composer Muteki, our technical assistant and video editor Bobinator, and of course, the support and feedback of listeners like you. You can support this podcast by making a small monthly donation at patreon.com/HG101, by subscribing to the HG101 YouTube channel, and by following @GC9X and @HG_101 on Twitter. But most importantly, help us claw our way into the podcasting firmament by getting on iTunes, subscribing to HG101, and giving us a 5-star review. Do it, or we'll make a generic pinball game based on our product. Hit all the drop targets, and spell KAL to increase our budget. Hit the drop lane to get the Dog's Bower bonus multiplier. That should really be the Dog's Bower multi-ball bonus, because we all know Dog's Bower's got a lot of balls. Until next week, keep keeping it real.